The climate emergency is here. As a bank, we must act now, or the things we love won't be the same tomorrow. Now is the time for change. We've committed to play a leading role in the fight. We will inspire more sustainable business, and we will challenge ourselves to be climate positive in everything we do. We must be conscious of our actions and the impact we make, at work and at home. Only then can we lead meaningful change. We can't do it alone. This will take all of our efforts and imaginations. And we all have something to fight for. For rainforests, for animals, for oceans, for nature, for our friends, for our family, for the world, for communities. The time is now. What will you do it for?
That powerful film showed all too clearly that climate change is one of the defining challenges of our lifetime, and it is a global challenge that is becoming more urgent every day. Wildfires in California, melting glaciers in Iceland, and drastic declines in wildlife species have all been in the headlines recently. And we continue to see more flooding and record temperatures threatening lives and habitats across the world. We appear to be at a tipping point, one where we have to ask ourselves what we want our legacy to be. What future do we want to leave for our children, our grandchildren, and the generations that follow? What can we do as individuals? What might we do as a bank and an industry to make a positive difference? All big questions with no easy answers. Here to discuss the many complex challenges and the actions we might take is Lord Stern, our recently appointed independent climate advisor. A big welcome to you, Lord Stern.
Thank you very much, Alison, and I'm delighted to be the climate advisor to NatWest. The stakes we're playing for have been underlined by the film and by Alison. We're headed for way over 3 degrees centigrade increase in global average surface temperature since the end of the 19th century, the usual benchmark. We're already at 1, and we see 1 degree centigrade, and we see how desperate are the climate impacts that we're already seeing, which Alison in the film summarized. Over 3 degrees is unthinkable. We haven't been there for 3 million years. Hundreds of millions, probably billions would have to move, and that would be extreme conflict. Those are the stakes that we're playing for. We've already lost 2/3 of our biodiversity in the last 50 years. And if we disturb climate and biodiversity, we make pandemics much more likely. Those are the stakes. So surely there's an imperative for all of us to act. And I hope that we all accept it, understand it, and are ready to move. That means governments, it means producers, it means consumers, it means citizens as a whole. And of course, production and investment are critical in this story. If we're going to stabilize temperature, we have to stabilize concentrations. Stabilizing concentrations means net zero emissions. Net zero is net zero. If there are positives anywhere, there have to be negatives somewhere else. So we should all be aiming at net zero. Every household, every firm, every financial institution should think about how they get to net zero in the next 30 years. They're not all going to do it in 2049 and go from something big to zero in the last year. It means driving down now, and this decade is absolutely critical. We have to cut emissions by something like 50% in this decade between 2020 and 2030. The good news is that we can do it. And the good news is that as we do it, we generate cities where we can move and breathe and be productive. We're much more efficient. Our ecosystems are robust and fruitful. This is a much better way to increase living standards, reduce poverty all around the world. It is investing in the future. And the investments of the 19th and 20th century are already doing very badly as we reorient ourselves in the 21st century. Responsible investment performs well by the conventional criteria. Irresponsible investment is what the name says. It's very risky. And I think increasingly firms and financial institutions are leading on that, often getting ahead of governments and recognizing that the investments of the 21st century are different from the investments of the 19th, 20th, and they will be profitable investments. But not everybody is there yet, and financial institutions can be crucial leaders in this whole story. And that's why the leadership of NatWest is so important. And it's very important how around the world financial institutions are moving on this. It's something from the last couple of years, well, obviously for many it's before that, but we've seen real acceleration in the last couple of years, and that's enormously important. If private sector and financial institutions are ahead of government, then that's fine. We put pressure on government to catch up. We want also governments to move. We've seen Europe move, declare for zero by 2050, and their whole budget for the next 7 years, the whole recovery budget is oriented around that. UK, it was the first G7 country to commit itself to net zero. China has committed in this last couple of weeks to net zero by 2060. The world is moving. It's not moving fast enough, but it's moving, and getting out ahead will be good for the planet and good for business.
Thank you, Lord Stan. Some tremendous insights there and clear opportunities for us too. It's important to be clear that positive climate change is not a competitive sport. We will not be able to do this on our own. This is about collaboration across the industry, collaboration with sector-leading experts, collaboration with customers and government, because this is going to need everybody to help support. But the need to do it is more urgent than ever, and we don't have the luxury of sitting back and trying to work it out. We've got to get on with it. So we're moving forward, and I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we face. So time is of the essence. In terms of NatWest, as the largest lender to British business and a leading lender to renewable energy in the UK, we have a clear obligation to play an active role in supporting Britain's transition to a low-carbon economy, to reduce the effects of climate change and to protect the planet for future generations. It's incredibly important to me, to you, and to our stakeholders that we take the lead. So to embed climate change responsibility meaningfully across the bank and our culture, we have made it one of our 3 key areas of focus and an integral part of our purpose. We have 2 bold ambitions. First, to make our own direct operations climate positive by 2025, and more importantly, to at least halve the climate impact of our financing activity by the end of this decade. To drive swift progress across the bank, in the short to medium term, we have committed to stop lending to and underwriting major oil and gas producers and companies involved in coal-related activity unless they have a credible transition plan aligned with the 2015 Paris Agreement in place by the end of 2021, with a full phase-out from coal by 2030. We will also stop lending to projects involving exploration for new oil and gas reserves. We will support mortgage customers to become more energy efficient, with an ambition that 50% of our mortgage book is at or above Energy Performance Certificate Equivalent rating of C by 2030, and an additional £20 billion of financing and funding for climate and sustainable finance by 2022. We have quantifiable, stretching targets in each of these areas with direct links to our executive remuneration. So let's have a look at some of the progress we have made. At NatWest, our intentions are clear and we are moving in a positive direction. But what do banks need to be to become a benchmark for climate change in the sector? I'm going to put that question to you, Lord Stern. What does leading look like?
Thank you very much, Alison. I think in large measure it describes what you are planning to do. And I think as you do it, you will take it forward. And it's very important to stay on the frontier because it's fast moving. One area I would emphasize is the consumer and the householder. In this next 10, 15 years, all our households are going to need to become really energy efficient. You described that in what you just said, but we need to ramp up those standards. So you've got one standard now, but you're going to have to ramp it up as the challenge develops over the decade. We're going to have to switch the way in which we heat and cool our homes. And that's going to develop. Probably air source heat pumps will play a big part in that, but they must, of course, be driven by zero carbon electricity. And they probably will double up as air conditioning units in the summer, just turn it from positive to negative. But those are the kinds of things which are going to be major investments for households. The timing of those investments will matter. The way in which you interact between the bank and the person who's working in the house will matter. If hydrogen's important, then the interaction, it may well be, the interaction between those who are managing the hydrogen infrastructure and those who are installing in houses and buildings and the financial institutions will be very important. So ramping up the standards as we go and committing in advance to doing that, thinking through how we go to scale is going to be very important. And I would add one more thing, is helping people with their own investments. Young people, I'm fortunate to be a university teacher, so we're with them. They're moving into jobs, they're acquiring pensions, and they look to the future and they ask themselves, will my pension, which probably for many of them will be the second half of this century, will it be in the places that are going to survive the competition and the sense of direction of this 21st century? And they ask themselves the moral question as well, which is, will my pension program and the investments involved in it, will they be going to directions and activities which are going to make life livable for myself in my old age, perhaps even more important, the children and the grandchildren? So of fundamental importance is how people's pensions, their finances, feeds through into investments and real activities in the world. And financial institutions are of fundamental importance in doing that. So helping people with their future investments as well as the current expenditures they have to make will be very important. But once you set yourself on the road, then the learning processes work well. But you have to plan to learn because we know it's going to move quickly. Alison, what's your advice on how firms can really embed the right approach to the risks of climate change in their culture? And could banks do more to influence positive change?
For me, it was about putting climate at the top of our agenda. I made it one of my 3 key areas of focus and linked it directly to our purpose. I think it's actually vital that you have a clear strategy to tackle climate change, as you suggest, Lord Stern, and that everyone knows what it is. Regular communication and commitment from the executive team from the top of the house is clearly absolutely vital. I've talked a little bit about what might be done in terms of customer offers, but I think we need to work with everyone from retail to large corporates, public sector, academia, and the real economy to drive climate through everything that we do. It's also vital that we look internally and set the tone by getting our own house in order. We have a publicly stated ambition to be a leading bank to address the climate challenge in the UK and Republic of Ireland with some bold commitments. To help us get there, we've had quantifiable targets and we have hardwired climate impact considerations into our decision making. I think, as you say, having those targets is so important so that you can measure progress. We've also underlined our determination by appointing you, Lord Stern, as our independent climate advisor to help us really challenge ourselves and hold ourselves to account as well. Climate affects us all, so to some extent we're pushing on an open door, which I think is fantastic how this debate has moved on and the urgency of the issues. So our challenge is to identify the areas where we can have the most impact and the most impact quickly. So to target our efforts so the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Putting our own house in order and focusing our customer services are two really important ways in which we might move the dial. But in the context of a global emergency, they might be considered the low-hanging fruit. So my view is we can and we must do more. We have to explore the ways to leverage our influence to drive exponential progress on this area. By this, I mean looking beyond the walls of our organizations, beyond our sectors, and beyond geographical boundaries. We have to challenge ourselves to think and act as global citizens, as stakeholders in our planet's future. It's one of those things where it is absolutely a non-competitive sport. We've all got to leverage off the expertise and the impact we can have. And for me, it's about starting to do what we can with those visible commitments. For NatWest, we plan to make our own operations climate positive. We've taken action by being the joint first organisation worldwide to commit to all climate group initiatives, EV100, EP100 and RE100. We're also founding signatories of the UN Principles of Responsible Banking and joining the United Nations Environment Programme's collective commitment to climate action. Earlier this year, we also became the first major UK bank to sign up to the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, alongside nearly 70 banks and investors from 5 continents. And most recently, we joined the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD, informal working group. I talked earlier about the importance of partnership and collaboration. We've built really strong and productive relationships with trade bodies, with leading universities such as Imperial College London, with academics like those at the London School of Economics, Grantham Research Institute. Together, we have a shared focus and a shared determination to achieve our climate targets. And there is a real positive energy in these relationships that gives me great cause for optimism. Thinking again about our potential to influence and the importance of leading, we know that the impact of an organisation's supply chain on climate is on average 5.5 times greater than the impact of the organisation itself. So thinking about that and that really significant impact, our response has been to introduce a new supplier charter, which sets out, among other things, our expectations for the way those we partner with might contribute to a low carbon economy. We ask them to manage their operations in accordance with good environmental practice. We ask them to not cause harm, and we encourage them to think about what more they can do to innovate and improve their environmental performance. Perhaps key, though, is that we ask them to examine their own sectors and supply chains to look for further improvements to build in improvements that help safeguard our environment. It is a collaborative approach that has the potential to benefit everyone. In closing, I want to underline that our commitment to driving positive climate change could not be clearer. We are embedding climate awareness and responsibility firmly into our culture at NatWest. But this is everyone's problem, and I hope this has got you thinking about what you can do. This is not a single-player game. Every one of us needs to step up and inspire those around us. We need to do more and do it faster than ever before if we are to succeed in this greatest of all challenges. Time is of the essence, so let's start today. Thank you.